Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Larson, Director of Sustainability at Enviva Biomass. As most of you know, Enviva released our new Responsible Sourcing Policy on June 4th, 2019. Our new Responsible Sourcing Policy expands our prior policy in a few key areas, including incorporating pellets we purchase from other manufacturers, expanding our High Conservation Value, or HCV, policy and procedures, especially to certain upland forest types, and pledging to make tangible progress in addressing landscape-scale conservation issues and restoration opportunities. In addition, as part of our new responsible sourcing policy, Enviva will have increased transparency around our sourcing. As a key part of this increased transparency, we will be reporting twice a year about the progress we are making in implementing our new responsible sourcing policy. Our mid-year report will feature concrete steps we have taken, internally and externally with partners, on implementing our plans, key outcomes, and accomplishments. Our end-of-year report will focus on sharing our plans' deliverables and quantitative accomplishments. If you haven't already seen our implementation plans, please visit our website under Sustainability and Responsible Sourcing. In addition to discussing progress on our implementation plans, we will also answer questions submitted over email about our updated policy and its implementation. If you have questions, please email me using the email address shown. Today's time doesn't permit us to discuss all of our plans and progress in this webinar, so we have selected those which may be of greatest interest to our stakeholders and conservation partners. The first section of our responsible sourcing policy is Sustainable Forestry Standards, which has 3 provisions. The first provision in our Sustainable Forestry Standards is that forests we source from will regenerate as forests and won't be converted to other or non-forest uses. We have 2 plans related to this. As a long-standing policy, we commit to only purchase material from land where landowners intend to reforest. Ray's Landing is a bottomland hardwood tract along the Roanoke River in North Carolina. After we bought wood from it in 2013 and 2015, prolonged flooding killed not only the seedlings, but also seed in the soil seed bank, so regeneration has not been good. This fact contradicts our policy and values as a company, so we are making it right. Working with the full support of the landowners, we worked with the North Carolina Forest Service to develop a planting plan, and we contracted with the North Carolina Forest Service nursery to grow bald cypress seedlings. We arranged for a planting crew to plant the stand at our expense. Everything was set to plant Ray's Landing last winter, but the continuing high floodwaters on the track would likely have killed the bald cypress seedlings. So to best ensure success, we contracted with the nursery to grow the seedlings for a second year, which will mean the seedlings will be especially tall and more able to survive possible future flooding. We will have the planting crew plant bald cypress seedlings this winter. The second provision of our Sustainable Forestry Standards is that water quality will be protected on tracts from which we take wood. Enviva has long sent our foresters to tracts from which we buy wood to ensure 100% compliance with water quality best management practices. Thus far in 2019, we have confirmed 100% adherence with our BMP policies. Enviva foresters visit our tracts to perform field inspections. During these inspections, the foresters grade the tract for BMP compliance by checking that the site meets the state standards for maintaining haul road conditions, cleaning up the site, preventing the soil erosion and runoff, stabilizing streams, and others. After inspection, the foresters deem that the tract is either in or out of compliance with state BMP requirements. When tracts are determined to be out of compliance, Enviva foresters work with the suppliers associated with the tract to remedy any issues and bring the tract into compliance. But again, we have not found any compliance issues so far this year. The third and final provision in our sustainable forestry standards is that we will maintain high conservation value forests, or HCVs. We've committed to using the HCV network approach, which involves 3 steps. First, identifying HCVs, about which I will say more in a minute. 2, developing sourcing procedures to maintain or enhance those HCVs. And 3, developing a monitoring program to do ongoing assessments of the effectiveness of one's HCV policies and procedures. The HCV network approach identifies 6 types of HCVs, including species diversity, landscape-level ecosystems, ecosystems and habitats, ecosystem services, community needs, and cultural values. Enviva's 2019 HCV plan is to work with conservation partners, especially NatureServe, state natural heritage programs, and Earthworm, to identify the full range of HCV types in our sourcing regions, and in 2020, to implement policies and procedures to maintain or enhance HCV forests and begin implementing our monitoring system. Early in 2019, at a workshop in Raleigh with NatureServe and state natural heritage programs, we collaboratively defined a prioritization methodology for 2 types of biodiversity defined in the HCV network approach: species diversity and ecosystems and habitats. Our prioritization methodology is based on the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation's Conservation Sites approach, which is described in more detail on the Virginia DCR website. Using a methodology based on the Conservation Sites approach, NatureServe has been working with the relevant natural heritage programs to get prioritized, spatially explicit biodiversity data in the 7 states in which Enviva operates. Specifically, NatureServe will deliver to Enviva data on imperiled species and community element occurrences with rarity rankings of G1 through G3 and S1 through S3. To date, NatureServe has helped develop the prioritized data in 3 of our 7 states, and NatureServe plans to have developed for us the remaining states soon. To complete the identification step of the HCV network approach, Earthworm is helping identify the other HCV types in our sourcing areas. This year, we will focus on identifying the landscape-level ecosystems of importance, HCV2, in Enviva's sourcing basins, and understanding what sourcing or mitigation practices might be necessary within them. We'll also be exploring what vulnerable ecosystem services, or HCV4, exist in Enviva's wood basket that would not be mitigated through our typical BMPs for water quality. For HCVs 5 and 6, which focus on community needs and cultural values, we'll be piloting a stakeholder engagement process at our new mill in Hamlet, North Carolina, in order to establish a process that will be replicated at each of our mills in a phased approach. After we have a complete data set, Enviva will determine how we will apply these data in our expanded HCV policies and procedures. As part of that process, Enviva's sustainability team has developed a draft set of new additional HCV procedures that we will test on a pilot scale before applying them on all of our primary wood sourcing in 2020. Finally, Enviva does not view HCV identification and maintenance as a one-time step in our stewardship. We have and will continue collaborating with conservation experts to better understand and steward rare and critical parts and aspects of the forest landscape. As we said in our original policy, we also know that there are special places in the woods that should remain so. Defining special places can be subjective, so we have drawn some bright lines. We do not harvest or source from old-growth forests or other areas of special concern that we have identified in partnership with leading conservation organizations. Going forward, Enviva will continue collaborating with conservation experts across our company and updating our HCV policies and procedures in light of new data, conservation needs, forestry and conservation practices, and developing restoration opportunities. The second section of our responsible sourcing policy is verification and transparency. In 2019, we plan to improve our verification in two major ways. First, we are enhancing the audit policies and procedures of our track and trace system with remote sensing data. In 2018, we made major revisions to our data collection forms and systems, formalized our track and trace procedures, and provided training for the procurement team in order to create an auditable process. We increased our tracked monitoring capacity and incorporated aerial imagery into our weekly tracked verification process. Building on this, in 2019, we are working with NEPCON to develop the standard for track and trace, to develop an auditing framework, and to conduct an audit to assess the accuracy of the data we receive. From this, we will be able to make claims about our data that are verified and backed by a third party. Additionally, we are working with the firm TerraPulse to develop a land use change monitoring model. TerraPulse specializes in landscape mapping and monitoring, using machine learning and real-time geospatial intelligence. With this model, we will be able to verify that the forest is regenerating at harvest tracts from which Enviva has received wood. Secondly, we are improving our verification by further expanding the acreage that we help enroll in tree farm forest management certification from 60,000 to 90,000 acres. The American Tree Farm System is a network of family forest owners sustainably managing 20.5 million acres of forest land. Enviva provides third-party certification to landowners through this system by enrolling landowners in our independently managed group. In addition, in 2019, we are starting to offer Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC, forest management certification. We hired Milliken Forestry, which has a large FSC independently managed group, to help us enroll 10,000 acres in FSC management in 2019. Milliken just completed their third and final training of our procurement and sustainability foresters, and we have started enrolling our first landowners into FSC certification. We are also working with a logger supplier to get FSC chain of custody certified. FSC requires chain of custody certification from the forest management certified tract to the purchasing mill. We will work with loggers and suppliers to ensure that we have chain of custody certification in place. Adding FSC forest management certification enhances and expands our menu of certification offerings to stakeholders. To increase our transparency in reporting, this report features our first of our twice-a-year reporting on our progress toward implementing our new policy, as I mentioned at the beginning. In addition, as part of our commitment to transparency and reporting, we are working to develop a corporate sustainability report and have begun work on a materiality assessment and data management processes for reporting. The third and final section of our new responsible sourcing policy is our pledges and conservation leadership on landscape-level conservation issues and restoration opportunities. To help keep the amount of forest land stable or increasing at regional scales, our 2019 plan was to support the reauthorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which we heard from the conservation community was a critical source of federal dollars for land conservation around the country, and that we could play a role in helping it get reauthorized through Congress. Enviva hadn't before promoted federal policy not directly related to our business operations, but Enviva did support the reauthorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Our team met with key offices on Capitol Hill before LWCF was thankfully reauthorized on a permanent basis earlier this year. The second provision in our section on pledges in landscape scale conservation leadership involves conserving wetland and high carbon peatland and tropical forests. To help conserve critical wetland forests in 2019, Enviva again followed through on our ongoing pledge to invest $5 million over 10 years into our Forest Conservation Fund. In 2019, our awards will help conserve in perpetuity 4 wetland tracts, 1 in Virginia and 3 in North Carolina. One of the projects, called Salters Creek Landing, will conserve over 5,000 acres and over 11 miles of waterfront in eastern North Carolina. With 7,450 acres of conservation projects included in our 2019 grant cycle, we are proud to have met our 2019 implementation goal. When completed and combined with projects previously funded, our 2019 projects will bring the total acreage that Enviva's Forest Conservation Fund to over 24,000 acres. The 10-year goal of the Enviva Forest Conservation Fund is to help conserve 35,000 acres of bottomland hardwood forests. In 2019, Enviva began supporting another wetland conservation initiative, a state tax credit program in Virginia that partially compensates landowners who leave forest buffers along rivers during harvests. Enviva learned about the Riparian Forest Buffer Tax Credit program from our partners in our Bottomland Hardwood Task Force. To help promote the program and increase implementation of riparian forest buffers, Enviva is working with a consultant to pull together information and engagement from a wide range of stakeholders, including loggers, sawmill operators, landowner representatives, the Virginia Department of Forestry, the Virginia Forestry Association, and land conservation finance experts. So far, we have identified key strategies to reduce barriers for landowners to use the program and develop potential improvement in the program we are pursuing. For our part, Enviva arranged with the Department of Forestry for us to pay the $150 program registration fee on behalf of landowners in Southeast Virginia with whom we help get certified in the tree farm or FSC programs. Enviva's 2019 goal is to boost participation in the program in 8 Virginia counties by 50%. In those counties, the average annual participation rate is about 12 participants. So our 2019 goal is to have 18 landowners participate in the program. Working with the Virginia Department of Forestry, Enviva will cover the $150 landowner registration fee for landowners who enroll in our forest management groups. The third provision in our landscape scale leadership section is to address the conversion of high-quality forest habitat for at-risk species. In our 2019, our plan is to understand and identify ongoing conversion risks in our sourcing regions. And to do that, we are working with academic scientists at North Carolina State University. Together with the Forest Inventory and Analysis Unit, we are developing methods for using FIA data to quantify rates and types of forest conversion in our sourcing regions. You can read more about this work on our Voices of Enviva blog, linked below. The last provision in our landscape leadership section is to help restore critical, threatened, or declining forest types. As I mentioned earlier, in 2019 we are developing ways to strategically support the restoration of longleaf pine forests. Longleaf pine is a high conservation value forest because over many decades its extent has been greatly reduced and because it provides critical pine savanna habitat for many threatened and endangered species. We view this as a tremendous opportunity because restoring longleaf stands often requires removing mid-story hardwood that shades out the understory plant community, or thinning canopy to let more light reach the ground, or even clear-cutting other pine species to plant longleaf seedlings. Enviva's sourcing can and does play a critical role in the restoration and maintenance of longleaf stands in many of our sourcing regions. For a description of some of the ways Enviva has already been working with the longleaf community and land managers to restore longleaf pine forests, see some of our blogs on our Voices of Enviva webpage. Our 2019 longleaf restoration plans include conducting a pilot project at our new plant in Hamlet, North Carolina, and developing a company-wide 3-year longleaf restoration plan. Our pilot in Hamlet has the goal of certifying and helping restore 500 acres of longleaf stands. By design, we wanted to focus initially on the quality of the restoration work before focusing on expanding the quantity of our longleaf restoration. In addition, we are developing partnerships with the conservation community around longleaf restoration in 2019 that we will build on and expand in our restoration-oriented sourcing in future years. Our Hamlet pilot involves 3 critical steps that we have completed or are conducting as we prepare to start producing pellets at Hamlet, which we actually started doing recently. First, we solicited and have received from leaders in the longleaf community a set of appropriate harvesting and management practices to improve longleaf stand conditions. These harvesting and management guidelines will be adapted and integrated into the tree farm or FSC management plans that we will require of private landowners from whom we source as part of longleaf restoration. Secondly, we have started to recruit private landowners who wish to restore their existing longleaf stands through selective appropriate harvesting. To recruit landowners, we are working with the local longleaf implementation teams in South and North Carolina, the North Carolina Conservation Partnership, and the South Carolina Longleaf Conservation Partnership. For more information on LITs, please visit the America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative website listed below. The third and final step of our pilot is to work with Enviva's wood procurement team, logger suppliers, and willing landowners to conduct the appropriate harvesting techniques that will leave longleaf stands in better condition and that will help supply our Hamlet plant with pine and hardwood. In addition to recruiting private landowners, we are also reaching out to state and federal land managers who are maintaining or restoring longleaf and who could benefit from the market our Hamlet plant creates. We will learn many practical and strategic things through our Hamlet pilot on longleaf restoration that we will integrate into the company-wide 3-year longleaf restoration plan, which we will release at the end of 2019 with leaders in the longleaf community. We are conducting an assessment of the amount of fiber that could and should be removed from longleaf stands in all our sourcing regions to improve their condition according to the assessment metrics developed by NatureServe. Based on our use of the HCV network approach, we will also develop and implement a monitoring system for longleaf stands pre- and post-harvest, using the rapid assessment tool that is being developed by the longleaf community. Our community-wide longleaf restoration plan will set sourcing goals for significant and increasing percentage of our primary wood purchases at our existing and new plants to come from directly and verifiably from helping restore one of the most biodiverse and critically important forests in the Southeast. That concludes our reporting on our 2019 plans. We will now turn to some questions we have received from stakeholders. Our colleague Curtis Smalling asks the following. We had discussed whether Enviva or its third-party suppliers might use storm debris and urban wood waste to reduce demand from forests, but that would seem to be precluded by the stated goal of only sourcing from forests that will stay forests. Thoughts? Curtis, I think you're referring to the discussion that we had during one of Enviva Bottomland Hardwood Task Force meetings. Thanks for following up on that conversation. It's a good question because using waste wood and storm debris, products that have no other market and that would otherwise go to waste, can be very good biomass resources. It's also a good question because it illustrates that there sometimes can be trade-offs between good conservation and sustainability goals. Enviva does purchase some urban waste wood. On our track and trace web page, it's listed or categorized as arboriculture, and it amounts to about 1% of our primary wood supply. However, because we take seriously our commitment to know where all our primary wood supply comes from, and because, as you correctly point out, we have clearly stated policy of only buying from forests that will be regrown as forests, we are cautious about buying wood because it is often, buying waste wood because it is often hard or even impossible to track it back to its source, and it can come from forests that were cleared for development. Likewise, we do purchase some storm debris. For instance, after Hurricane Michael in Florida, Enviva purchased over 300,000 tons of storm salvage material. What's more, we were still able to collect track and trace data for this material, ensuring that we knew the source and composition of the material we received. Our purchase of storm debris is limited by quality. In theory, salvage material is an ideal feedstock for biomass. However, because of the difficulty in transportation during storm events and the inability for degraded salvage wood to meet quality standards, local markets could only purchase a small proportion of salvage material. Curtis also asks, and in the sustainability standards, number 3 says address, quote unquote, address loss of critical habitat or something like that. How can you affect that at the regional scale? Maybe your blog tackles that, but just wondered how you answered that as a proactive goal. You're right that we clearly cannot single-handedly solve the loss of critical habitat on regional scales. But that doesn't mean we won't do what we can. Our policy pledges us to develop ways of addressing the conversion of high-quality habitat for at-risk species. In 2019, as a first step in implementing our policy, our plan is to identify conversion risks of high-quality habitat in our sourcing regions. We need to know where the conversion risks or conversion is occurring, in what regions, in what forest types, and what are the drivers of the conversion. This assessment will guide our strategies going forward. In 2019, we are also working with many wildlife-oriented groups and agencies, as well as willing landowners, to determine how and where we can support their forest restoration recommendations. We are intentionally starting small this year to make sure we get this right. And over time, we and our wildlife-oriented partners think we can ramp up our collaboration and restoration-oriented sourcing and help improve wildlife habitat on many thousands of acres of privately and publicly owned forests across the Southeast. This won't be the only way we address the loss of habitat for at-risk species, but it will contribute to it. Sander Evan asks, why Enviva just doesn't require FSC certification? Only about 17% of forest land in the Southeast is certified to any forest sustainability standard, so no forest product company could require certification to any standard or system, let alone FSC, which only has a very small fraction of the certified forest land. Moreover, we think tree farm and FSC certification both have great value in helping landowners know about their forests and the natural resources they contain, and the management and marketing opportunities that are available to them to attain their goals for their properties. We will continue to support sustainable forest management certification as well as supply chain certification. Xander also asks, how accurate is the NatureServe and State Natural Heritage Program's data? Is it good enough to protect unique sites? That's a great question, and there are numerous aspects or issues around data accuracy that we're working on with NatureServe and State Natural Heritage Programs in the expansion of our HCV policy and procedures. First, by using the Virginia Conservation Sites approach, we will include not only the mapped location of a specific imperiled species in areas deemed unsuitable for harvest, but we will also include some appropriate habitat around the mapped location of the imperiled species or community. This buffer will help address the uncertainty of the exact location of certain species, especially mobile ones. Secondly, we won't only rely on mapping data, which in some states isn't as comprehensive as it is in other states. At the request of a conservation organization and staff at a natural heritage program, we will begin in 2019 setting up conservation teams, which will create a structured, ongoing way to continue to listen to and learn from local and regional conservation experts in our sourcing regions about species and ecological communities where sourcing may be inappropriate. Throughout our work with them, Ricky White and Carl Nordman at NatureServe have been careful to note that the lack of NatureServe data about imperiled species and ecological communities doesn't mean that they don't exist in any given forest tract. So the last way we will address the issue of data accuracy is to build into our HCV policy the provision in future years to get updated data from NatureServe and natural heritage programs, as they are able to conduct additional on-the-ground assessments and have updated species distribution data. Some of the updated mapping data might also be based on improved species distribution modeling. We also received questions from our colleague Sean Brogan at the North Carolina Forest Service. If Enviva chooses to not source fiber from a tract due to it being a certain forest type, do you think it will still be harvested? What would you say to the landowner of the tract who was unhappy about not being able to sell their woody material for Enviva pellets. Long before our new responsible sourcing policy, Enviva was working to address this challenge. We founded our Forest Conservation Fund specifically to address this issue. As Enviva expanded the types of bottomland hardland forests we would not source from, and landowners wouldn't be able to sell wood from these types of forests to us, we pledged to invest $5 million over 10 years to help landowners and conservation partners to collaboratively conserve 35,000 acres of these and other bottomland hardwood forest types. This year, Enviva has been working with loggers, landowners, and other partners to increase the actual conservation benefits on the ground. Take, for example, our work to promote Virginia's Wider Buffer Program, or Forest Buffer Program, a program that helps compensate landowners who leave riparian forest buffers during harvests. With the help of a consultant, we convened a group consisting of loggers, landowners, and many other stakeholders to help identify and overcome barriers that keep landowners from participating in the program, as well as loggers from recommending the program to landowners. In our expanded HCV policy and procedures, we are developing ways of sharing with landowners and loggers the information we get from NatureServe about tracts that may contain imperiled species or communities, or other high conservation values, which we hope will increase the likelihood that these tracts won't be harvested, even if we don't buy the wood from them. John also asks, carbon sequestration can be a very complex issue. Do you have a few overarching thoughts when it comes to forest management, wood pellet usage, and carbon sequestration? One overarching thought is that the answer to these questions lies in the forest, not in computers. Rather than speculate or conduct complicated modeling to know if biomass is good or bad for climate, we can check data on actual carbon stocks and know if biomass usage is decreasing forest carbon stocks. In our sourcing regions, U.S. Forest Service Forest Inventory Assessment, or FIA data, show that forest carbon stocks are stable or increasing. Stable forest carbon stocks are foundational to our business, our customers, and our regulatory frameworks. In fact, over many decades in the Southeast, forest carbon stocks have been increasing because landowners respond to markets for forest products by growing more trees and keeping their forests as forests. In our view, loss of forest to development or agriculture is the bigger climate threat. Finally, Sean asked to please describe how Enviva is working with forestry and wildlife communities on management challenges related to current and candidate threatened and endangered species. As I said in response to Curtis Smalling's question about addressing forest type conversion, Enviva is expanding our work with wildlife-oriented groups and agencies to help support their urgent work to improve habitat, particularly for threatened and endangered species. Perhaps counterintuitively, but in many cases, it is our strategic and appropriate sourcing that is supporting our conservation partners' habitat restoration work. To restore forests and improve their habitat value, it's often necessary to remove certain trees to achieve the desired structure and habitat conditions. And Enviva's purchasing of low-grade trees often helps land managers accomplish their restoration goals. Consider some specifics on how our prior and ongoing sourcing is improving habitat for threatened and endangered species. Our plant in Cottondale, Florida is helping restore gopher tortoise habitat on over 800 acres at the Geneva State Forest in southern Alabama. Our sourcing at our Cottondale plant has also been supporting longleaf restoration work on Eglin Air Force Base and at 2 state parks. At our Greenwood plant in South Carolina, our sourcing is supporting habitat restoration at U.S. Army's Fort Jackson outside of Columbia and at a public school near McCormick, South Carolina. We are also working with the state of South Carolina on numerous current and future restoration projects. In North Carolina, Enviva's sourcing has supported longleaf restoration on the Croatan National Forest and bottomland hardwood restoration on the Roanoke River National Wildlife Refuge. And we are working with numerous private landowners and nonprofit conservation organizations to support the restoration of longleaf forests. At our new plant in Hamlet, North Carolina, we are starting a pilot project, as I mentioned earlier, to expand our support for longleaf restoration by private forest owners. By strategically sourcing in ways that directly supports improving stand conditions, Enviva will help improve habitat on many thousands of acres. This concludes the presentation. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about the implementation of Enviva's new responsible sourcing policy, and we thank you for watching. Thank you also to all of our partners who make this work possible. As a reminder, please find our policy and implementation plan resources on the Enviva website. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me at the email provided. We're also excited to continue working on these plans and look forward to our year-end reporting, which we will share the results of our 2019 plans and announce plans for 2020. Thank you again, and we look forward to receiving your questions and comments. Thanks very much.